All right, so this morning we're starting another subject, a very interesting one, which is the Linux FTP server. In fact, this is the last weekend, I should say, in which we are doing new material for this module, because it's week number 4. So that's the main plan, today and tomorrow to do FTP. It takes a good 2 days to cover this subject properly. And then the last week will be review and exam. Last week, in fact, is later because the next 2 weeks are holidays, right? So anyway, let's get into today's subject. So FTP, the Linux FTP server. So FTP is a subject that you have probably studied with Windows previously. Here I have a diagram to review the main idea. So the FTP protocol is used to transfer files. In fact, FTP here I have in my lecture notes as well. So FTP stands for File Transfer Protocol. So the idea is to download files from the server, or possibly if you have permissions to upload files to the server. So this is what the diagram is showing here. So a client machine and an FTP server running at least one FTP site. I'm showing 2 sites here. And then you also need DNS so that clients can connect to the site by host name and not by IP. I mean, IP will work, but in general, people connect to sites by host name. They don't type the IP. So these are the minimum 3 computers that we need. The FTP server itself, a DNS server to provide host name to IP resolution, and a client, of course, to verify the site is working. So here's another protocol to do file transfers, just as we did previously with Samba, or even before that with SFTP or SCP. So is this redundancy, you should say? Do we need so many different ways of uploading, downloading files? Well, each of these protocols has its reason. See, FTP is mainly used for large-scale networking. On the internet, many of the sites from which you download files are FTP sites, are FTP servers. Or in a large enterprise, they also use FTP servers for file transfers. Samba is more like for relatively smaller local network, where you share files and printers. But there are definitely similarities. The commands are similar. Get, put, lcd, it's the same commands in fact. But as we're about to see today and tomorrow, FTP in Linux provides you with some very interesting configuration items. All right, so that's what makes it really interesting. It's a very advanced protocol for file transfer, and this is the kind of service that is one of the strongholds of Linux. There are companies out there who might not have their complete network running on Linux there, but they may use something like an FTP server, which is Linux-based, because it provides good security and very detailed configuration options. All right, so the port number for FTP is 21. That's the control port. There's also a data port, which is 20. So both 20 and 21 are used by FTP. 20 for data, 21 for control. But usually when somebody talks about the FTP port, we say 21 because this is a port by which we control it. If, for example, you use a firewall to allow or disallow FTP, you'll do it on port 21. It's the control port. So these were some introductions. Any questions on the basics of FTP before I start setting up, or to show how to set up a CentOS FTP server? I hope everybody joins. I don't know why in this class every morning there are so many meetings going on. I start the main meeting there, and I see 34 persons right now in the meeting. That's the one you should join, all right? Ignore the other meetings. So let's start this setting up the CentOS server as an FTP server. So here we go, port 21 FTP server. Now the first question is, which package do we use? Linux, for those who have done Windows FTP server, in that case, it's pretty clear. You have the Windows server that comes with the IIS package, Internet Information Services, that you install as a role on the server, and then IIS includes FTP as well as HTTP for websites. So it's part of the IIS package in Windows. In Linux, there's it's an open source system where you have maybe more than one option, and there are many packages available for FTP. They all use the same FTP protocol, but each one might have its own specific ways of setting up things or configuring things. The one we'll be using is built-in CentOS. It's a very nice package, and it's VSFTPD, very secure FTP. So that's built in. You don't have to download any additional packages there. You can use it as it is. But be aware that there are other packages. You might come across another, let's say a CentOS or Linux server running another FTP package. It will be, of course, based on the same protocol, but it might have its own details of configuration. So VSFTPD then. Here's my FTP server. This was from last week, the HCP, or whenever we did the HCP actually, the week before. So the first thing is to check the package. All right. And also to make sure, I'll do iptables -f. As usual, always do iptables -f for now, and make sure that SE Linux is disabled. So I'll check the RPM -q. It's typical VSFTPD, and you're supposed to have it as a result of the CentOS server installation. If you don't have it for whatever reason, then you should install the package. Now, starting the server is very simple. For basic operation, even without doing any additional configuration, you may start the service and you may start using it as a basic FTP server. So right now I don't think it's running for me. Let me check. So VSFTPD is also the name of the service. It's not running right now, so I will start it. So I'll first show you the quick way to check that it's working there, and then we'll get into detailed configuration. So I'll go to a client machine and connect to this one, just using the IP for now. Well, the main IP of this computer is, the first IP identity at 0 is 100.250, and I should be able to connect to the FTP side using this IP. So I'll go to a client machine, such as this Windows machine here. First, I'll make sure I can ping the server. All right, so probably it's a question of either this one being a different IP range or VLAN. I've been doing many different courses with these virtual machines. So let me check. It is on the right IP range, so it's probably a VLAN configuration here. There's no VLAN here. Maybe the server itself has a VLAN configuration. So this is okay, or yeah, all right. And here it is. Right, so I'll ping it again. Now it works. And to connect to the FTP site, you simply use the FTP command. So I'll go with the IP to start with. Here we go. And you have to enter username and password. And by default, VSFTP sites allow anonymous access. We'll see more about that. It's coming soon. But the default, with the default settings, you may it allows public access, anonymous. So you can just have anonymous, meaning no user authentication required. And here we go. I just logged in. Just to verify the site is working. Now, on this side, I've already done some configuration. The first time you do this, you tap anonymous, it will prompt you for a password. Just press enter for a password, right? So don't waste time typing a password for anonymous. The whole point is that it's public access. You don't need a password. So even though with the basic configuration, it will prompt you for a password, just press enter for a password. Okay. So any questions on, with the buy command, I exit the connection here. So any questions so far? Now, can I do the same connection using the CentOS client? Let's do that. So I'll go to CentOS client. First, I'll make sure again I can ping the server. Now, probably again, it's a question of VLAN here. Or let me the IF config. I'm using ET at 0, which is in the 100 range. Right. So I can ping it now. So if I do the same FTP command as I did in Windows there, here we go. So same thing. And anonymous. Right, so exact same idea. Now you see here, you see details such as welcome to the food site or hello message and so on. Initially, you will not get all these things, but that's why we're here this morning. We're going to learn how to configure all these details. All right. Now, if you take just a fresh CentOS machine, this FTP command will not work initially. Why? Because the FTP command, the client command of FTP, is not initially available in CentOS 7. But it's very easy to install it. I think we have seen this before, but just to remind you, you just go to the DVD of the CentOS installation, and it's just an RPM available there. So it doesn't have any dependencies. So just install it very easily by doing RPM-I for each package. You can also, of course, do yum install, but it's easier to go to DVD, and it takes a few seconds to install this RPM. No questions yet? Now you can also use a web browser to do the same connection. If I use Firefox here, so you type FTP with the IP of the server. Eventually we'll do soon with the DNS name, but for now I'm showing by IP. This numblock keeps on changing all the time. Okay. So 250 is the IP of the server again. So here you go. Anonymous access in a browser means it connects you right away and it doesn't ask you for name or password. And as you can see, that's a structure. Once you log into the site, sorry, there's a subdirectory named pub or public for anonymous access. And that's where you'll find the files available to download. We'll see very soon how to configure all this, but this is the result. You connect to the site, and you see there, you see the pub directory, and you click on it, and you see files available to download. You see, to show this from the command prompt again, just to see it's the same thing. So here you do type anonymous, but then you just press enter for a password. And then you see if I do ls here, here's the pub directory. And then I go cd pub. And these are the files available to download, just as we have seen in the browser. So you see in general how it works, right? Again, if you have any questions at this point, this is, the basic anonymous access. All right, so now time to start configuring and seeing more details about how this server works. So I'll go to the server. So now the FTP configuration is done in the etc vsftpd directory. And you have a few files there originally. We have added more files. The first time you connect to it, you'll not see all these files. You'll see some of them. So you'll see in particular FTP users, user_list, and vsftpd.conf. So initially, these are the three most important files to focus on. Then we'll add more files. So FTP users, user_list, and vsftpd.conf. So let me start with FTP users. In fact, FTP users is like a classic older type of file, which is normally available in any Linux FTP server package. But as you'll see later in this lecture there, we don't really need this file in this vsftpd package, but it's there so that administrators who are used to it will feel good. They're used to this file, but we can do without it. But since it is there, we need to know what it is, how it works, and how to use it, or eventually maybe troubleshoot something and realize that maybe it's because of this file. So let's see. It's simple, in fact. If it's a text file, so when I open it, it gives you a list of users. Most of the users are system internal users there, but root is there by default. And you may add more users. For example, I add user 600 here, although has a square sign now, so line is disabled. Right. So what does this file do? Actually, it tells you that there's a very clear explanation here. Users that are not allowed to log in via FTP. So this is a negative logic file, meaning whoever is listed here will not be allowed to log in to the FTP server using FTP, of course. Okay? So it's a list to reject users. Simple as that. You add a user here, the user will not be allowed to log in. And now you might say, why is root there? See, I didn't put root myself. It's there by default. So does that look strange? I mean, usually you think of root as someone who has all the privileges, all the rights. And now we see something which is opposite. Root is not allowed to log into FTP as a default setting. Well, it makes sense. It makes sense to me because logging into FTP is a client operation. Okay? Someone logs into FTP in order to download or upload files. So root is the one that's the person who will set up everything here like I'm doing right now. I'm logged as root here. I'm setting up the FTP. But it is not me who act as a client and download or upload files using FTP. That could be even a security problem. You don't want root to act as a client. Right? So, or if really that person who's acting as root right now wants to upload download files using FTP, then he or she can log in with a different user account. That's not a problem. But the root account itself is not meant, at least by default, to be used as an FTP client account. That's why it's in this file. But if you remove him from this file, then at least from the point of view of this file, root will be allowed. Or if you put a square sign. Any questions on this? So you see the logic of this file. It's simply a list of users who are not allowed to log in. All right, I don't see any questions for now. I hope everything is good. So now let's see. User 600 right now has a square sign. So this line is disabled. So first let me see, as it is, can I log in as user 600? So I'll go to a client machine again. I hope I remember the password, if not I'll reset it, but let me give it a try. So I'll connect to FTP again, but this time I'll tap user 600, not anonymous. So now this is through user authentication. User 600, of course, must be an account on the server. As you can see, I can log in. All right? So user 600 right now is allowed to log in to this server. And when user logs in, like with authentication here, the login directory is the user's home folder. Is user's home folder. If I do ls-a to cd domain files, see, a bash profile, bash rc, and so on. So it's the user's home folder. So now what I'll do next, I'll go back to the FTP users file and enable this line user 600 by removing the square sign. So this means now user 600 will be disabled. I mean, disallowed to log in. I'll just save the file. I don't even need to exit. I'll do Control O to save it. When you edit this file, you don't need to restart the FTP service. Just save the file. So as a result now, misclicked, sorry. So if I try again logging in as user 600, it does prompt you for a password, and now I will type the right password, but it doesn't let me log in. See, that's what that message you get. So that's how this file works. If you add a user to FTP users, initially it looks like you're allowed because it does prompt you for a password, but even as you type the correct password there, it doesn't let you log in. All right, so any questions on how to use this file, FTP users? Okay. All right, so let's move on to the next file. So the next file looking at is user underscore list. Again, it's a text file. Now this file has some similarities with the previous one, FTP users, but it's not really the same thing. But it can do the job of FTP users. That's why I said earlier, in this package of VSFTPD, we don't need FTP users. This file, in fact, is more interesting, and it can do the job of FTP users and then some. So you may just as well ignore FTP users and use this file, but keep FTP users in mind. You should know how it works. What if somebody has configured before you this server and you need to troubleshoot it? So you need to know how FTP users work. But it's better in general to use this file in this package. So what they say here, this file now may behave in two different ways. If user list underscore deny is equal to no, only allow users in this file. If user underscore list underscore deny is equal to yes, which is the default, never allow users in this file, and do not even prompt for a password. So can't get any clearer than this. It's very nicely explained here in these 3 lines. So read them, please, and let me know if you have any questions. Now, maybe the question you'll ask is, what is this line user underscore list? Where is this line? User list underscore deny. This is in another file. So this line is somewhere. We'll see in a few minutes. But as you read these 3 lines, do you get the idea or not? That depending on the configuration here, this file may either allow only those who are listed here, or it will disallow those who are listed here and allow everybody else. And unlike the previous file, this one does not even prompt you for a password if you are disallowed. It just denies you access right away. We'll see in a moment. So again, I see user 600 here as a square sign. Also important to mention, just as in the previous file, root also is there by default for the same reason. Root is not meant to be used as a client FTP account. So root is disallowed to log in. Okay. So root is in both files, and therefore, if you want root to log in as an FTP client, you have to remove root or put a square sign in both files, because if one of them disallows it, it will be disallowed. So user 600 has a square sign, but I still left it in FTP users, right? So let me first take care of that. So in the previous file, I'll put a square sign. So this file will not block this user. But now in user underscore list, I will remove the square sign. So now this file, with its default behavior of yes here, should block this user account. So if I go and try, again, you don't need to restart a service, just make sure you save the file when you make changes. I just hit Control O and I saved it. So back to the client machine. So user 600. You see now, it tells you right away permission denied, not even asking a password, because it is in that file user underscore list. So if you want to deny some specific users, this is the best way of doing it. Add them to user underscore list. If I put a square sign, user will be allowed again. I'll save it. Sorry. So user 600. Here you go, I can log in again. Now, as they say here, this file again can also behave the opposite way. If I do the right configuration like mentioned here, then it will be the opposite completely, meaning only those who are listed in the file will be allowed and nobody else. So we'll see how to do that shortly. By default, it's yes, meaning it denies those who are listed here. In other words, this file may behave either as an allow list or deny list, depending on another configuration item that we're about to see. By default, it is a deny list. So we just covered those two files, and let me know if you have any questions. Also in the lecture notes I have right now. So anonymous connection we have seen from the command prompt through the browser by IP. We'll see soon how to do it by hostname, download files. And now we have just seen the file FTP users and the file user underscore list. No questions yet? As usual, guys, I really recommend you take good notes. There are many, many details we're about to see in FTP. This is a very nice package, a very nice FTP server, but at the same time, in order to learn it and practice it well, you need to be aware of all the details. So don't miss anything. The next step then, we will look at the main configuration file, which is vsftpd.conf. So this is the file, just as we had smb.conf for Samba, or dhcp.conf for FTP, or namd.conf for DNS. So this is the main file through which you configure the details of the vsftpd server. So let's get into it. Now, there are some lines I have either edited in this file or I have added some lines. So I'll let you know step by step. That's why I'm telling you, take notes. When you first open this file, you'll not see exactly what I'm showing here. I have done some editing. I'll mention every single thing that I've done. So first thing we see here, see this line here, which, of course the lines for square size are just explanations, but the first configuration line that I have here is this. And this is a line that I have added. You don't have it by default. So this is to make clear which IP this server is using for this site. Listen underscore address. This is important to add, especially because if not today, tomorrow, we will do virtual hosting, meaning we're going to create more sites on the same server. And therefore, it should be very clearly defined as to which IP is used by which sites. Right? So my plan is to use this ETH0 IP of my server for this FTP site. Of course, the IP that you type here must exist. That's a mistake I have seen done by some students. They think as if by typing an IP you create the IP. No, this is not to create an IP. This is to use an existing IP on the server. So this is my main ETH0 IP, and by typing this line I'm saying this is the IP I want this site to use. And now I can immediately turn my attention to DNS. Then I'll come back to this file because we need the host name, right? We need the host name for a site so that people can connect by the name of the site, not by IP. And now that I've specified the IP, it's just a matter of configuring a host name for the site in DNS. This file by itself does not deal with DNS, but you specify the IP here, and then you configure your DNS wherever your DNS server is, so that there will be a host name to result to this IP. The DNS server could be on the same server as the FTP server, or it could be another server. It doesn't matter. For me, it's another server. But nothing wrong if your FTP server is at the same time a DNS server. Okay? So when I look at my diagram here, the DNS name I'm using for this site is ftp.soccer.net. It means for this to make sense, in my DNS I must have this resolution. ftp.soccer.net should have a DNS record to resolve to this IP. And let me show that it's routine DNS configuration at this point. So I'll go to my DNS server. I just put it up very recently, so I'll do the usual things first, IP tables -f, etc. DNS service. And to verify my configuration for my record, so I'll go to varnamd and check the soccer.net file. And there we go, I have a record for 250 there. And I have an alias name for it, FTP3. So if you look at these two lines, this is a sort of configuration you must have in your DNS. Host record to result to the IP over FTP site, and an alias name for it. In my example is FTP3. Could be just FTP. If you have any questions, let me know. So on the client, I'll verify if this resolution works. Of course, I also have to make sure the client points to the right DNS server. Do the screen first. All right. So result.conf. I'm not pointing to any DNS servers right now, so I'll now know it. I don't need the search line. It may slow it down for nothing. So 27 is my DNS server's IP. And if I do ls lookup, ftp3.soccer.net, it's probably because I can't ping the DNS server, it must be on a VLAN as well. I do ping. No, it's always important to check these things at the beginning, especially because we're doing many laps. So here we go. I think I left the DNS server on the VLAN. You see, someone who doesn't check these things might spend lots of time and say, how come FTP is not working from, how come I cannot click by name, and never realize that the problem is as simple as a VLAN configuration in Hyper-V. So always check the basics. Here we go. I can ping it. I'll do ls lookup. It's still not working, so let's see what message we get. No servers could be reached. Okay. Let me check again my result.conf. Is there. Now, let me see, maybe last time I did something in namely.conf file here, which is on DNS internal, external. Let's check that. namely.conf. So in the internal section, here we go. See, because last time I did an example with routing internal and external zones there, I left Circle.net disabled in the internal section. So I remove square signs here. And the client is internal now because it's in the same IP range as the server. So I restart the DNS service here. And try again. So it works now. So it means now I should be able to do FTP connection by hostname, which is a preferred way of doing it. Anonymous or user 600. Here we go. So any questions on this to do enough configuration with DNS and everything so that you can connect to your site by hostname? Anything not clear? So just to recap quickly, what you need to do is first on the FTP server, in the vsftp.conf file, to specify the IP used by the site by typing this line, and then go to your DNS server, wherever it is, and make sure that you have a DNS record, such as in my case ftp3.circle.net, that resolves to this IP. And then, of course, the client will point to DNS, and it should be able to connect by the host name. All right, I don't see any questions yet, so we're okay. So let's continue with configuration of vsftp.conf then. This was the first line, listen address. So next you see the line anonymous enabled equal yes. And that's a default line. It's there initially. And this is the reason why, as soon as you start a service, you're able to log into the site anonymously. If I put this to no, obviously it won't work. Look, I'll do it immediately. If I change this to no, it has to be uppercase no. Now, when you edit this file, you have to restart the service. What I'll do here, I'm not going to close it open all the time. So I'll save the file, Control O without exiting it, and I'll open another terminal in which I'll restart the service. So, meaning system control, restart vsftpd. If you do this and get error messages, you know what to do as usual. Go back and troubleshoot your syntax. So with this, back to the client, and I'll do the same thing as I just did here. Try to log in anonymously. So it no longer works. So it means at this point, this site is not a public site. You need to authenticate in order to log in. You need to provide a valid username and password. So it should still work with a username. So instead of anonymous, if I type user 600, and assuming that the previous two files we have seen do not block this user, then the user should be able to log in. Here we go. So I will enable anonymous again by putting yes. Any questions? Now the next line you see there, I've tapped this one. It's not there by default, and it's not a big deal, it's just for convenience. It's not a line that is necessary, but it's nice to have. So by typing no unknown password with the underscores there, equal yes, it means do not even prompt for a password for anonymous login. That's why, see when I log in anonymously, so maybe show it again, just to understand what that line does. So when I log in as a user, first let me restart the service, sorry, because I put anonymous equal yes again. So let me save and restart. So you see, when you log in as a user, such as user 600, so it prompts you for a password. That's of course a must because the user has to authenticate. However, when I log in anonymously now, it doesn't prompt me for a password. It logs me in right away, because that's the whole point. Anonymous means public access. You're not supposed to authenticate to log in. You don't need a password. Okay? But it behaves like this because of that line I've added. No unknown password equal yes. If you don't add this line, it will prompt you for a password even as you log in anonymously. And in that case, just press enter. But the sad thing is that I see people who don't realize that, and they almost religiously type a password for anonymous. That you don't, whatever you type, it will work because it doesn't need a password. It's a waste of time. So the best thing is to put this line so you don't even get prompted for a password when you log in anonymously. Any questions there? It's very quiet. There don't seem to be any questions, so I repeat, good news. It's clear. Everything is clear. All right, so I'll continue. So next, we see here the line local enable equal yes. This is a default line. And local enable simply means that users, such as user 600 who authenticate, are allowed to log in. That's a normal default behavior, right? Users are allowed to log in. But if I put to no there, they will not be allowed to. I'll do it. So let's say I put to no equal no here, uppercase, and let's see what happens. So I'll save and restart the service. And I'll try again as user 600. Look at the message right away. This FTP server is anonymous only. Why is it saying this now? Because of that line. Because I just put there locally enable equal no. And this means do not allow users. Anonymous is still allowed because of this line. So that's why it's telling you it's only a public server now. It's only meant for people to log in anonymously and download files. Then what if I put no for both lines? What if I put also a no here, like I had earlier? If both lines are no, oops. If I do this, then you may just as well, stop your FTP service because nobody will be able to log in. So at least one of the two lines has to be yes, at least one of the two, so that your server will be useful. If both are yes, which is default, then you may log in anonymously or by typing an name and password. But then you may say, if both lines are yes, if you can log in anonymously, so why bother typing an name and password? Question makes sense? Let me repeat. If both lines are yes, which is default, it means you can log in anonymously. Then why bother typing an name and password in that case? Well, it is important because when you log in anonymously or as a user, you don't log into the same directory. So let me show again. I want this to be clear. So let me save again and restart. And back to the client. So now both lines are enabled. Now, when I log in anonymously, I am in this directory under which there is the pub directory, public. So I'll go to pub, and these are the files available to download. We'll see shortly, later in this lecture, where exactly is pub directory. But we see here that anonymous login takes you to this place, a place where there's a pub directory, and that's where you can download files from. But if you log in as a user, such as user 600, this is a different story now. I'm logged into the user's home directory. So it all depends what's the objective, right? By having users log in with authentication, they log in to their home directory. Anonymous login on the other end, if allowed, takes you to a general place where there's a public directory where there are files available. So public access is one thing, user access is a different thing to the user's home directory. And one last point about this, you might still maybe say, all right, what if I log in anonymously and then go to the user's home directory? Is that possible? So let's try. Anonymous. And then what if I say, all right, let me go to the home directory of user 600. I cannot, it doesn't let me go there, right? So you'll see later, Anonymous in fact is confined to only one place. He cannot navigate out of it. He cannot just go anywhere you want on the server. So it's very nicely designed, it's very secure. So Anonymous is only allowed to view that public directory, nothing else. Again, I'll pause a few seconds if you have any questions. Okay. All right, no questions? So you realize that all this will be in the exam, right? There's no lab report left, but it's guaranteed that you'll have FTP questions in the lab exam. So you're supposed to learn this well and practice it. So as I'm saying, I hope you follow the lecture well and take notes, and then practice it today and tomorrow. But it's a very interesting subject. It's one of the reasons why many companies are interested in Linux, this sort of services. Okay, so we can continue. Now the next line here, this is the one we came across earlier in the previous file. So it says user list underscore deny equal yes. So to understand this better now, let me in the R terminal open the R file. So earlier we discussed and demonstrated the file user underscore list. So let me open it again here. So now we understand what's going on here. It says if user list underscore deny is equal to yes, which is the default, then never allow users in this file and do not even prompt them for a password. So I already demonstrated this, but now we see where this is coming from. So the line is in this file. And in fact, by default, the line isn't even there. I have typed it. But even if the line is not there, it assumes by default it will be as if the line was there equal to yes. But to have more control, it's a good idea that you add the line here. And you can change it to no whenever you want to. So if you change it to no, what happens then? It will be the opposite behavior. It will only allow users in this file. Okay, very simple idea. I will not demonstrate here. I don't have time in the lecture to show you every single configuration detail and how it works. But here the idea is very clear. You can try it in the lab time. So if you change this to no instead of yes, then it means for the user to be able to connect to this site, the user must be listed here without square sign. So if you put it to no, And if the user is not listening to this file, then the connection will fail. By default, it's the opposite. It's yes, meaning a user is allowed unless listed in this file. By putting it to no, it would be the opposite behavior. Users will be disallowed unless they are listed in this file. So just try it in the lab time and you'll see. I already demonstrated how the yes works. You can do by putting it to no and trying, and explain the idea how it works. If you have any questions, go ahead. All right. So next thing here, it says write enable equal yes. This general line through which FTP enables writing, meaning uploading. Now, let me make it very clear. This line by itself doesn't guarantee that uploads will work, but it's a first condition. So yes means it opens the door for an upload to work. You put it to no, then uploads will not work. Now don't worry about the UMask. It's not, I don't want to complicate things for nothing. It's not really important. And now we have here a non-upload enable equal yes. So this is for the second condition for anonymous uploads to work in particular. So let's look at these possibilities now. Uploading as a user and uploading as anonymous. For a user, in principle, this line should be enough. Write enable equal yes. But why do I say in principle? Because let's remember from Samba again, the universal principle. Whenever you have network access to a resource and you want to write into that folder, then there are two layers of permissions, right? There's a network permission, in this case FTP, and there is also chmod permission. Two layers, always. And both should give you enough permissions for you to write. Otherwise, you cannot. If one of the two blocks you, then you cannot write or upload. So there is only one of the layers, which is saying, yes, you can write as a user. The other layer is the chmod permission of the folder to which you're trying to write. So now let's see. If I log in as user 600 again, will I be able to upload as it is? So I'll go to the client machine. And let me first decide what I will upload. Or what I will try to upload. So I'll take it from my test2 directory. I have many files there, I think. So let's say I'll upload any of these files. Let's say I'll try to upload hello or hi, any of these files, IP info, any of these files. So now, back to the, I'll connect to the FTP set 0600. So how do I upload? The same command as we have seen in Samba or earlier in SFTP. So first you do LCD to choose your local directory, which is test2, this example. And then the put command to upload. So if I do put hi, these are the files there. It says could not create file. Now let me see. I can post your reason there. If I do ls there to see what's on the server already. Yes, I know why it's not working. And in fact, it's good because we understand now all the details. So you see, it didn't let me upload, right? So let's interpret this now. You see, on the server, the FTP configuration file is saying write enable equal yes. I logged in as user 600. I tried to upload the file hi from my test2 directory, but I could not. So before I explain why I cannot, let me try to download. Does download work? So let's say I'll try to download now this file named work, or actually it's a directory. I'll try to download 5.txt. So the get command can be used for that. Get 5.txt. And this works no problem. It goes into the test2 directory, which is my LCD. So I'm able to download as user 600, but I'm not able to upload. And let's understand why. Now, as I said earlier, there are two layers of permissions. One of them, which is the network FTP permission, is saying, yes, you can write. What's the second layer? The second layer is the folder's chmod permissions. Which folder? The user connects to his home folder. Let's go and check the home folder on the server. cd/home. I'm supposed to have user 600 there, right? There's a home folder. So I'll do ls-l. And I see user 600 there. But now, what are the permissions? You see here, 755, and the owner is root. I know this is not common for a home directory. I've changed this and you'll see later why. But you see exactly why the upload is not working, because the chmod permission is read-only, unless you're root. So no surprise that user 600 cannot upload at this point. Okay? Now, you see for user 602 here, it's a different setup. This is default for home directory. For user 602, the owner is user 602, and it's 700, meaning the right permission is there. So let me try as user 602 then. User 602. Okay. Yeah, there's a reason for this, and you'll understand later why you get this message. So I'll try another user actually. I'll just change the detail that I'll understand later so that this works properly now. Won't be long. Our size later, we'll get to this detail later. And I restart my FTP service. So now again, I'll try as user 602, who has chmod write permission here on his own folder. So user 602. So I can log in. So I'll do the same thing as I did earlier with user 600, LCD test 2. And I'll try to upload that file high. And I just did the upload, it worked. Here is the file, it's been just uploaded. And if I want to download the file again, that should work. I will -A to see the hidden file as well. It's used from directory. So I may download the file, let's say bash logout. So I'll do get .bash logout. There we go, I downloaded. So it's the same command as in Samba, lcd get put, okay? But do you understand now what are the conditions for upload to work? These two examples should make it clear. So user 600 was first in the FTP configuration file, you need write enable equal yes. This is the first layer. If this is no, then upload will not work. So FTP is saying yes, you can upload. But is this enough? No, it may not be, because you also need the second layer to allow you. The second layer being the chmod permissions of whatever folder you're trying to upload to. So when you log in as a user, such as user 600 or user 602, you log in to your home directory. And it all depends on your permissions there. For user 600, the permissions are read-only. And that's why this user was not able to upload. For user 602, who is the owner of his own folder, the permissions are read and write. And therefore this user is able to upload. So again, very important idea here. I'll demonstrate how it works. Any questions on users being able to upload or download? Download is simple. Once you log into a site and you have read access to the folder, you can download. Uploading requires more configuration. So still, I don't see any questions. We're okay. So if I go to lecture notes, to recap on what we did so far a little bit, just some of the main ideas. So we have seen all this: IP, hostname, downloading files, login as a user, anonymous connection, using Command Prompt or web browser. We have seen the files to allow or deny users. And then the main configuration file I've been using, allow deny users, anonymous versus user authentication, jailing we haven't done yet, okay? So here we go, upload permissions. So in vsftp.conf you need to have write enable equal yes, and also local permissions chmod should be good enough. Now I haven't done yet anonymous uploads. That's coming next, uploading as anonymous. I did it only as a user. But this requires more explanations. Anonymous uploads. First, we need to understand exactly where Anonymous logs in. So I'd rather do that after the break. Now in the next few minutes there, again, if you have any questions on whatever I did so far, this is a good time to ask questions before we take a break. I'll wait a couple of minutes, see if you have any questions. If not, we'll take the break. All right, then we'll take our break here. After the break, the next subject will be anonymous uploads. And we'll resume in 15 minutes, meaning 10 past 10, right? So please be back at 10 minutes past 10. That's when the lecture will resume. I'll also type a message here.